Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Annabelle. I'm Talent Coordinator at BioBuzz. I'm very excited to have everyone here today for our session. This is another one of our Career Catalyst and Community Office Hour sessions. And today we have Al Lichtenstein joining us. He is the founder and principal of HR Results, LLC. Al is also a seasoned HR executive and career coach, and he's very dedicated to driving organizational growth and empowering individuals to help navigate successful career transitions with confidence. So very excited to have Al here today. Before we do get started, I do want to give a big thank you to our sponsor today, which is BioTrack. BioTrack is supporting the program. BioTrack is a huge resource for upskilling in the life science in Maryland. They've trained over 17,000 scientists with their cutting-edge biotech workshops. So definitely check out biotrack.com. There's many different workshops they have. They run a couple different a month. And I also want to mention that today is part of the BioBuzz Talent Lab, which is your one-stop shop for career growth, job opportunities, and industry connections. So definitely go on, join our Talent Lab today, and you'll be able to see more opportunities like today's session. And I do want to hand it over to Al. Like I said, we're very excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. I've been eagerly anticipating today's presentation. And so good afternoon. And for those of you at other parts of the country, good morning still. But for those of you who have been out of work before, you probably know that the job search can be a real emotional roller coaster. And I am convinced that to have a more effective job search, you must approach it strategically. Too many individuals throw together a resume that has no heading, no impactful summary or profile, and instead of listing their accomplishments and achievements, they list their job responsibilities. Do these people know what's most important to them in their next job? Do they know how to effectively leverage their network? Are they prepared to answer the difficult interview questions? And from my experience, by and large, they are not. And so today, those are the areas that I'm going to focus on. So we're going to start out with developing an impactful resume, which is, there you go. There's the overview. We're going to cover the resume, what's important to you in your next job, networking more effectively, and ultimately acing the job interview. So from my perspective, part of approaching the job search more strategically begins with you learning more about yourself. And when I work with people in their job search, we start out by having them complete a few assessments to help them identify their skills, their competencies, their areas of strength, and what motivates them. And by identifying these things and talking to them about it and kind of brainstorming the best way to present them, we come up with these profiles, which are copies of actual profiles off of resumes of people I've worked with. So let's take a look at this, because I think that the top part of your resume, which creates the first impression, can have a big impact on the reception it gets from the reader and how it presents you before you get to the other sections of your resume. So as you can see, each one, and this starts right under your contact information, has a title. And whether the person was in project management but was also a scientist, or they were a quality systems management person, but the headline news is the kind of position you've had or the kind of position you're looking for. And then the three areas of strength that are listed under the title come out of the assessments that you did, where we want to project these are the things that you want to convey first and foremost to the readers of your resume. So for instance, the project management scientist person, their strengths are strategic planning, product development, and stakeholder management. The quality systems management person, GMP, GLP, and GCP, relationship management, and document control. And you can see which ones are selected by the clinical biorepository management person. But I think as you look at this, a couple things I want to point out. First and foremost, the areas of strength are not just functional skills. And two of the people put relationship management as skills because as we think about the job search process and networking and interviewing, any jobs you've had, you have to relate to coworkers, you have to relate to the people you report to, and you need to communicate with them. And these are skills that apply to all positions, whether you're a scientist, whether you're an art design person, whether you're an HR person, these all apply. I want to focus on the clinical biorepository management profile because if you look at the first four words of the profile, accomplished and award-winning. All right. So I'd like to think that all of us are accomplished in the jobs we've had. We've accomplished things, which is different than saying I'm experienced, which to me tells me you worked for a number of years. But too often when I start working with people, any awards or recognitions are on the bottom of page 2 or 3 of their resume. And I recognize some of you are very humble, but the point is a resume is a marketing tool. And I strongly recommend, as this person did, accomplished and award-winning clinical biorepository professional. And one of the things that I think that does is when you finally get interviewed, any recruiter, this is an easy question for them to say, gee, tell me about the awards you won, which ideally is a very easy answer for you to convey. But by and large, each of these summaries is 4 or 5 sentences that gets an overview of their background and experience. It highlights areas of strength, functional skills, as well as transferable skills. And then in these cases, you've got anywhere from 6 to 8 more areas of strength that are bulleted at the end of the summary. So you want to highlight the things that you want to stand out to the reader. Additionally, I mentioned that I look for my clients to identify what motivates them. And I specifically look to do that because what I've learned is that if you can list that in your summary, oftentimes it makes a connection with the reader. So for example, for the clinical biorepository person, driven to succeed and passionate about fixing what is broken. It jumps right out there to you. For the quality systems management person, they talk about their strong communication skills and proven successes fostering teamwork and collaboration across the organization. So again, I try to find a place where my clients can add a sentence as to what they're passionate about, what they find rewarding, what motivates them. Recognizing that this is only the top part of the resume, let me talk about the other key sections of the resume. In the professional experience section, for starters, I don't recommend going back more than 15 or 20 years tops. And that's because any experience before that probably isn't relevant or germane to the next job you're going to have. Under each position you work in, it's critical that you list your accomplishments and achievements and not just list job responsibilities. And when you list these accomplishments, I strongly encourage you to do a couple of things. One, to quantify the accomplishments. And if you can't quantify them, write them in such a way that answers the question, resulting in what job, what goal or objective was achieved by what you did. Because that's going to make more of an impression and it gives the reader an idea of the things that you truly accomplished. For me to just say I was responsible for comp and benefits, most HR people, as heads of HR, are responsible for that. But did I implement a comp and benefit program that attracted more people? Did I put in a benefit program that only increased costs by 5% year over year? Did we implement a reward system that recognized people for special recognition that we didn't have before? These are the kind of things that I think will have a much bigger impact, the accomplishments, the achievements. The other thing is, if you're not sure how many accomplishments or achievements to list, my rule of thumb is ideally anywhere you worked, you did something of significance. You had at least one significant accomplishment each year you were there. So if you were at a company for 5 years, if you had 5 accomplishments listed, that would make sense. In addition to not going back more than 15 or 20 years, depending on how long ago you graduated college and what age that makes you, in this day and age where there's concern about people who are maybe north of 50 years old, I would be very mindful of not listing the year you graduated. I stopped listing that a long time ago. Additionally, when you think of what's on your resume, you want to make sure it aligns with what you put on your LinkedIn page. Because most often as a recruiter, I'm going to look at your LinkedIn page before I meet with you and interview you. And if what's on the LinkedIn page differs from what's on your resume, if nothing else, it's an inconsistency that I might ask you about when we have our interview. So these are things that I would encourage you to be mindful of when you do your resume. Be very aware of what you put on your resume, because I can tell you, I interviewed someone once. I was very impressed that they quantified their accomplishments. And I said, well, how did you determine that you had a 25% increase in efficiency? And he stared at his resume and he hummed and he couldn't answer it. And I said, well, help me. How did you come up with this metric? And he said, I had someone help me with my resume. And if that's a deal breaker, I'll leave right now. And I said, well, let's see if you can make it up with other things. But the fact that he couldn't explain an accomplishment that he quantified did leave me with some question about the person. So that's kind of a quick overview about resumes. And I encourage you to ask me any questions you have about resume prep when we get to the Q&A section. Let's move on now to what's most important to you in your job search. So what you're seeing is the results of an exercise that I give all of my clients, because when I think of what the main reasons are that people leave jobs, I have found they leave because they don't get along with their manager. They leave because they realize they don't fit in the company culture. They did not get the career development they hoped for, and or the job just wasn't as challenging as they had wanted it to be. It didn't fit with their quality of life criteria, or they didn't feel that the compensation was competitive. And so what you're seeing is the end result of what is on an Excel spreadsheet. And I ask my clients to look at these 4 categories: comp and benefits, quality of life, career development, and the last one, company culture, relationship with supervisor, position responsibilities. And in total, come up with some 25 criteria that might be important to you in each of these categories, a total of 25 criteria. And after you've done that, prioritize those 25 criteria. So you can see right here with the individuals you're looking at here, This person, the number one criteria was salary. Number two was good benefits for themselves and for their family. The third most important thing was in the quality of life category, and they needed to have flexible hours. And the fourth and fifth most important things were under company culture, relationship with supervisor, and position responsibilities, because they wanted a company that was supportive of work-life balance and supportive of employees with families. Items 6 through 10, I highlighted in yellow. But basically, after doing this exercise, talking about it with me, making sure they didn't leave anything out, and sometimes reprioritizing things, what you've done is you've proactively developed a detailed roadmap of what's important to you in your next job, and you've answered questions to yourself for what people might ask you when they network with you, or what they might ask you in the interview. So let me give you an example. I worked with someone a number of years ago who was looking for a position as a CEO. And at the time, he was going through a divorce, and his daughter was just entering high school. And his number one criteria was, I can't relocate for at least 4 years. Okay. And importantly, this ideal job assessment we do at the front end of the job search process when you're more objective about things. Okay. We work on your resume. We do the ideal job exercise. All right. So the person does this. It's now 2-3 months later. He's interviewed for a job he's really excited about. And he calls me up and he says, Al, I had this great interview. They need a CEO for the position, and it's located in Houston, and he lives in Maryland. And I pulled out his ideal job exercise, and I said, Gary, the number one criteria on your ideal job exercise says you can't relocate for 4 years. And his response was, oh. So again, I find this to be a very meaningful assessment. It helps you at the front end of the process. It helps you with networking, with answering questions, with what questions you ask during the interview. But then at the end of the process, when you're blinded by titles and salary, it's an objective assessment of what you said was important to you 2, 3, 4 months earlier that helps you make the right decision for what job you take. So this is the ideal job exercise. Let's talk about networking, because from my perspective, the name of the game is networking. It's all about leveraging your relationships, leveraging the people you've worked with, former colleagues, contractors you work with, friends, relatives, all of the above. These people can be instrumental in helping you find the right contacts to talk to, find the right job for you. And again, as some of you are listening to me, you've probably have realized that in the past. I'm currently the contract head of HR for a biotech company, and I can tell you that the U.S. operation, 17 of the 20 people had worked together in the past. All right, we paid no agency costs. We had proven talent of people we knew that we worked with in the past. And oh, by the way, under the heading of networking and leveraging your network, 90 to 95% of companies have employee referral programs. And they would much rather pay an employee $1,000, $1,500, even $2,500 for referring somebody that they hire than paying an agency anywhere from 20 to 33% of the first year salary. So leveraging your network is critical. So let's talk about how you go about doing that. Unfortunately, too many people start calling their friends or relatives, and they say, are you aware of any job openings that I would be a good fit for? And 90% of the time, the answer is no, I'm not. And that quickly becomes a one and done networking call. And what we're looking to do with the networking is, by leveraging your relationships, you're looking to build and maintain working relationships throughout your job search. I was out of work about 20 years ago. And when I started reaching out to people, I probably had a network of about 75 people. And this was at the early stages of LinkedIn. So I was not on LinkedIn. And after a 9-month job search, I had over 500 contacts that I had made by networking, by reaching out, by leveraging my network. So let's talk about how you do that. So instead of calling and asking if they're aware of any jobs that they might be a good fit for, I recommend that you reach out to people, and after you exchange news, weather, and sports, you ask for advice, suggestions, recommendations, and more contacts. Okay, so to me, a good networking call was getting 2 or 3 more names of individuals that were recommended that I could reach out to that could be helpful in my job search. So after you get some contacts, make sure to ask the person you're talking to for the contact information of these people, or would they be willing to make the introduction for you? When you reach out to a new contact, let's say that Annabelle says you might want to reach out to Chris Frew. Okay, and she gives me Chris's contact information. When I reach out to Chris Frew, who may not have known me before and wouldn't respond to an email that came from Al Lichtenstein, who's that? It's probably some spam or marketing guy. In the subject line, I put, Annabelle Brady recommended I contact you. I'm sorry, Baldy recommended I contact you. And so now Chris knows why I reached out to him. And while I'm still talking to Annabelle, I say, by the way, do you mind if I keep you posted on my job search progress? And ideally she says yes. And so that means this isn't the only time I'm going to talk to Annabelle. I'm probably going to follow up with her after I talk to Chris. I might thank her, tell her how many more contacts Chris gave me. And maybe every couple of months, I'll reach out to her and say, hey, just touching base with you. And I've had some interviews, but I'm still on the search. Any other thoughts, any other contacts, any other recommendations? Because it's all about the relationships you're building. And then the most important thing you can ask your contact is, is there anything I can do for you? Because it's a two-way relationship. And even though you're the one looking for a job, you don't know how you might be able to help them. I had a situation once where I was networking with someone, and they said to me, I host a group session for people out of work, and where we're at, we don't have access for people who have disabilities. So if you know anybody who has a church or a facility that has access for disabled people, that would be great, and it would accommodate, my group that I head up. And a few weeks later, I talked to someone who said, by the way, our church would be glad to host that. And I passed the information along, and the person moved her location to where it could accommodate disabilities. So again, networking is all about leveraging the contacts, staying in touch with them, and relationships that pan out years later. So one true example, one of the people I networked with during my job search, 8 years later, is now the CEO of a company. And the head of HR calls me and says, do you do leadership coaching? because our CEO and our head of R&D don't get along real well, and we can't afford to lose either of them. And I said, sure, I do that. He said, great, our CEO wants to meet you at the local Panera Bread. So I meet him at the Panera Bread, and he's sitting there all important as a CEO, and he's never met me before. And when I show up at the booth, I said, this isn't the first time we've talked, because so-and-so, and I mentioned the name of the person who referred me to him, referred me to you, and I talked to you 2 or 3 times during my job search, and you were very helpful. And it just changed the whole mode. Big smile on his face. We sat down. How do you know so-and-so? Blah, blah, blah. And an hour later, he patted me on my hand and he said, you're the guy to do the job. And after I did the job, as fate would have it, the chairman of the board terminated the CEO, promoted the head of R&D to the CEO, who has now called me into 2 different companies to be his contract head of HR. All because of someone I networked with 20 years ago. All right, let's move on to acing the interview.
Al, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make sure we have time for questions. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes with this one.
Okay. All right, acing the interview. I can't speak enough about how important it is, because you want to research the company, you want to go on their website, you're going to see what their cultural values are, their beliefs, you want to read what some of the recent press releases were, but you want to know as much as you can about that company. And if you know anybody who works there or worked there, follow up with them and say, hey, I'm interviewing there. I'm looking forward to it. What can you tell me about your company? So, but by the time you get there, you're well versed on the company. You know what's going on in real time. And you also want to be very familiar with what's on your resume based on the example I gave you before. All right. You want to switch to the next slide? Thank you. So for me, what I tried to do here is give you an idea of some, what I might say, typical or difficult interview questions that you might get in a typical interview that you would want to prepare for, that you would want to know the answer for. So for example, and I start out with this, anyone I interview as a contract head of HR, what do you know about our company? Because if you haven't looked us up and you don't know much about our company, how interested were you? And it kind of tips me off to, if this interview is going to be worth my while. But it's very typical to ask, what do you know about our company? You do get the question, tell me about yourself, but I'd like to translate to you in terms of how you might answer it more specifically. Because tell me about yourself has always been viewed as a lazy question. But tell me about yourself really means, tell me about the evolution of your career. Give me an idea of the key skills and competencies you developed at each of the jobs, and tell me what reason you had for leaving job A to go to job B. So that ultimately the last thing they're telling you is why they left their last company and why the 2 of you were sitting across from each other. Skipping ahead to another one you definitely want to be prepared for. If I spoke with your immediate manager, what would they tell me are your areas of strength and what are your opportunities for improvement? Now, you might be first of all, you always want to start with areas of strength. You don't want to start with the areas of improvement. And I would think you would have 3 or 4 areas of strength, especially if you're familiar with your resume. Opportunities for improvement, I would only list 1. And if you're savvy about it, think of an opportunity of improvement that you might have been told about a few years ago that you improved, that you can tell them, well, I didn't have real good spreadsheet skills a number of years ago, but I since took a class for it, and we put together a number of assessments that we used those skill sets. So you had the opportunity for improvement, and this is how you improved it. Because any job you have, you're going to work with people, and different jobs are stressful or have more tight deadlines or whatever. And so I ask people, tell me about a difficult person you had to deal with on the job, and tell me about the situation you had to deal with them. And it's going to give me a good idea of how you handle difficult people, because eventually we all have to deal with them. There's also, in my mind, we all go through developmental stages at jobs before we've reached the level we aspire to be at. And so we learn things, we make mistakes, we mess up sometimes. So I asked them, tell me about a time things weren't going your way, or tell me about a time you messed up on the job. What lesson did you learn from that experience? And oftentimes you learn about someone who didn't proofread something or sent out an email to everybody that was supposed to be confidential. And the lesson learned is they double check, they proofread, they take their time before just sending something out. And then the last thing you absolutely positively need to be ready for is when they say, do you have any questions for me? Because if companies are looking to hire talented and inquisitive people with those traits have 4 or 5 meaningful questions. And if I came to that part of the interview and I asked someone, what questions do you have for me? And they said, this was a very thorough interview, I don't have any questions, I'm probably not going to invite them back for the next phase of the process. So this is kind of a quick overview of what goes into a strategic approach to the job search. And Annabelle, hopefully I didn't go over too far, but I hope we have a very interactive Q&A session now.